Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And I'll try this doe eyes things. Tell me if it works. Though, now I'm looking at me. My lips. Whatever. Moon is in my ninth house, and now is a good time to give you a little bit of a ninth house reflection. So, ninth house in astrology is both your connection to something higher than you, so that can be like religion, but also philosophy, and is also higher learning and academic studies. But also, if you go to some sort of a religious sort of studies, so going up the rank on a religious level, that is also ninth house, and is also when you travel. I want you to think about traveling abroad as a pilgrimage, because it's that sort of a travel. It's a pilgrimage travel, okay? So while it can absolutely be a vacation, I think that when people get on a plane, they usually don't understand the ninth house, what they can expect from the ninth house. There's a whole field called astrocartography. I don't attempt to understand this as a whole. I will need to travel in a lot of places myself. But before you even get to astrocartography, there is your natal chart, and this is also giving you a bit of what to expect from an experience of travel. And so the first thing is that travel is when you get on a plane, you meet a new culture, you're isolated from where you've been, and it's very exciting, but it's also an initiation. It's also kind of like a pilgrimage, and this is, I think, very relevant for when you want to have a good a good travel is an adventure. And a lot of time when people think vacation, so they spend so much money, and then there is always something that messes up with it. Maybe you can adjust it with astrocartography, you can adjust it a lot. But what you have in your ninth house, what planet you have, what is the ruler of your ninth house, how is it aspected, is going to tremendously affect your both higher studies and international travel experience. And to know this is going to, just like anything with astrology, is going to be very centering experience for you, so that you understand that even in the best of cases, those are the challenges that you're likely to have variation on the canon with them, okay? And also that those are the things that you're going to enjoy, even if things don't go out as well as you planned, okay? So let's say I have ninth house Scorpio, and I have Pluto, Saturn, and Mars in Scorpio, all retrograde. So for me, when I study higher studies, I will always be running into the themes of Pluto taboo issues. Okay, I was a veteran in my academia, but the first degree was also both linguistics and politics. Okay, so Pluto, politics, power, distribution of power, and the definition for the Department for Politics was the distribution of power under situation where the power is there's limited resources. Okay, so it was about power distribution, but the power relations, very Pluto, right? Very directly Pluto, in your face Pluto. Another is structure, and or either complete atheism, which is also Saturn, or orthodox religion. Okay, so you think theology, but you also think about structure itself. And indeed, I ran into discussing the structure of thinking, the structure of academia, and so on. And then there was Mars on the 22nd, which of course played various roles, both a perspective on what people call genocide, so learning about the various such cases, conflict studies, but also having my own life at risk in academia. That was not expected, but it's the 9th house, and I do have a 22nd degree Mars. But also tending to where there is assassinations and so on. When I think about my travel experiences, then yes, those included Pluto as well. Even sometimes the symbolism of Pluto, even when it's joyous, there will still be some symbolism. For example, when I was traveling, even as a child, I traveled to Netherlands, which is part of the family, yes, nation state, but for me, from the vantage point where I was born and grown, it's the other, it was abroad. And we were in Efteling, and one of the childhood memories was the talking garbage cans. I kid you not. Okay, so we were talking garbage cans. Yes, I'm that old. They were talking garbage cans who told you to put the papier here. So that was a childhood memory. I was always looking for taking something and putting them out of the garbage can. The garbage cans and garbage are ruled by Pluto. So you think about it. This is a very beautiful, thing, which was also very good for the environment. How they get children to pick up the trash, very practical, right? But also is signification of Pluto. It's garbage can. It is a childhood memory. Okay, it's what I remember. Yes, as older, when I've gotten older, then I would be exposed also to the taboo things or to the darker things around other countries, especially during COVID. So, but even in COVID, one of the places that I would always go to where there was food, where there was someone who helped me even a bit there, was a neighborhood called The Pipe, and Pipe is a Pluto signification. Okay, so and Pluto is also kind of like Pluto is kind of the garbage can that is filled with gold. It is where the taboo is. It's where what people don't talk about, where the trash is even sometimes, but is filled with gold. Is filled with wealth, and so that's really the signification of Pluto. Then I go to Saturn, and Saturn is of course religion. It is structure. It is also bureaucracy. Okay, so let's say if I take it to childhood memory, is when we traveled to basically try to apply for housing in Netherlands, and for bureaucracy we had to stay there, so it was very difficult, and of course we had to give up. But this was traveling to fix some bureaucracy, the very direct Saturn signification. Okay, it's the bureaucracy to do with traveling. Another Saturn signification that I would later have is that I traveled without the Dutch passport with me when I was escaping violence later, and I was really flying high with no ID. And there was waiting for the papers to come. So there was a signification of papers, of documents, of the things that Saturn is involved in. Also the issue of taxation. Again, being aware of what my taxes do, what my taxes don't do. Get all these things. So there's very mature experiences that are intermixed with the experience, what you experience when you go abroad. And then of course it was Mars. So 22 Mars. As a child, I think I was not so aware of these things around me, but there was the usual things for, when someone tries to break into the car when you sleep in the car, and that was, all this kind of scary stuff that I think people that don't have, let's say, Mars on the 22 Scorpio are less exposed to, or they could go a whole vacation without somebody trying to, I don't know, break into the car, murder them, and waking up. But that is unfortunately, and for later, when I was grown up, I was actually offered accommodation by a person who later I learned was serial killer, and he was helped by the community. And at first I thought, oh, maybe you can live with this person, and I said don't feel comfortable to live with a stranger man. I don't think it's safe for me. And later I discovered he was serial killer. So he took me on a ride, by the way, to one of the accommodation that I did stay. So that is all real. That is the signification. And actually, in Netherlands, I have ascendant Capricorn, which means that the fourth house is Aries, which ruled by Mars, and Mars is in the 11th house, in Scorpio. Yes, in the 11th house, Scorpio, 22nd degree. So that would mean that would be the ruler of my accommodation, for the house where I lived. That's for me not so good to live in Netherlands. To travel, yes, but not so good to live. So I have to be cautious. So this is very extreme one, because it includes the 22nd, it includes both malefics, it includes Scorpio and it includes Pluto. But for you, for example, you could have Venus well aspected, let's say have a Venus in Libra. So when you travel, you probably would encounter beautiful sceneries, flowers around, even courts, okay, but for their even for their aesthetics. Okay, it's like, oh, if you go into court, it's not because you have a hearing there, but because you see it like a museum. Let's take a look at the art there. For higher studies, you could study things to do with law, but also things to do with aesthetics and philosophy of aesthetics. Morality, you have to be cautious about morality being too interconnected with aesthetics. Okay? For Scorpio, there are other stuff, but you could also see the connections between, or you could, for example, expose, if you have like a harmonious aspect with Pluto, you could expose the hidden facets or the dark biases of where something looks beautiful and we think it is right and just. Okay, so that is how different ninth houses could have completely different significations and completely affect your travel experience. And I also want to emphasize that your ninth house does matter. So of course, you will see it differently for when you travel to different locations, because then your relocated chart would be different. So let's say you have, right now I have Pluto in my 12th house, okay? Let's say I don't want it in my 12th house. If it was in Netherlands now, it would be in my 2nd house. Yes, but my housing would be controlled by a 22 Mars. So, so I have to be cautious, right? But also I learned about the many crime journalists that are dealing with cold cases. Cold, Saturn, something that took the time. Murder cases, Scorpio, 22, of course. And this is how the 9th house still played a role, but it's played a role from actually my accommodation being connected to it. So not good for me probably to live in Netherlands, maybe only to travel. But for you, for example, you want to move something, let's say from your 12th house or from your 6th house, then a relocation can be good, because you have to look at many details. But the relocation chart would put it in other places. You would still deal with your natal chart. It would still be like an overlay. So it's not like it's gone. Okay, let's say I move from somewhere and then my Pluto is no longer in the 12th house. Okay, it's not like it's gone. I still have Pluto transiting my natal 12th house. So we still experience that. It's just that now I have an overlay of another house that it's in, and I can focus on the matter of this house. Okay, and that is more like you add a certain layer that can ease your experience with your natal chart. This is why I say the natal chart, the point where you came into life, your birthing point, it does matter if you have 9th house that has certain significations, let's say that are creepy, then still you're going to be having to remediate those, and you're still going to run into those significations with your higher studies, with your worldview, and with your international travel. Okay, you want to know that, because if you know that, there is that level of acceptance where, let's say, you go to an astrocartographer and you're like, oh, I want to change this, I want to change that. They change things for you and they are great at what they do, and you have overall a better experience than what you would have if you didn't go to them. But if you don't know your natal chart and you don't know what is the ninth house for you, what's in there, then what you can expect from this area in your life, you can come with over expectations. And remember, traveling, getting on a plane or sailing to somewhere is more like pilgrimage. It's still ninth house. It's still ninth house. Okay, you're still leaving the surroundings where you're familiar with and going somewhere where you're not familiar. That's the whole joy of it. You get a sense of discovery, but it's also dealing with loneliness, dealing with having to learn many things very quickly, the misunderstandings of cultures, and so on and so forth. So overall, when you tend to, let's say, remediate ninth house experiences, you can either go to like strengthen the ruler, but you have to say if it's like you're within sect, you're outside of sect. For me, both malefics are ruled by the malefic that is less terrible for me, but it also means that the bigger malefic, okay, is still there. Like I still have to deal with it, but I have to use my Martian powers to deal with that and tackle with that, rather than just having them separate. So now the question is, when you know these things, how do you remediate? So one remediation is, of course, astrocartography, where you look both at your relocation chart, at the lines where things fall, and then there is a thing called parents, which means, let's say you have, I don't know, a Jupiter line, okay, and let's say Jupiter is well aspected in your chart. If Jupiter not well aspected in your chart, what will happen? It will trigger those things, okay? So let's say you have Jupiter, I don't know, square Pluto, okay? You will have those significations of your beliefs challenged, a crisis of belief, existential crisis around your philosophy of life, which is also Jupiter, a crisis in your traveling, okay? Like that exists, so you need to understand that. And then the question is, how do you go around it now? But let's say within the Jupiter, let's say it's the best planet for you, and still within that Jupiter line, you have parents, which are like the horizontal. And if the different parent is adding another signification, and that is, for that I think you still need, I think AstroSeek does allow for parents, but you do need someone who works with the program, because you need to know where it is, but you also already need your like natal chart for many of them, and that will tell you what are all the significations, all the astrological timestamps around the place that can change. And I tell you also the chart for the place you're visiting. So let's say you're visiting I don't know, United States. How does your chart blend with the chart of United States is important. Those significations are also going to be very, very evident. And what does it accentuate, okay, in your natal chart? Because it's going to accentuate certain things in your natal chart. All of these things together, they make of your experience. And then of course the skies, when the skies, for example, right now Pluto is in my 12th house, I know that I'm learning about theosophy, I'm learning about the politics and the economy of different religions and sects and faculties of thoughts, which also of course relates to academia and international politics. So I'm like, oh, that's very Pluto in the 12th experience when my Saturn is in the 9th house. Okay, when the ruler of the 12th is in the 9th house. But it's also possible that I will live in different places. So it's about time I would do astrocartography properly. Um, and this is how the transits, they trigger a certain topic. So it already exists in your chart, but from a different point of view. Okay, for when Pluto was in Capricorn, then the ruler was in the 9th house. It was ruler Saturn. It was time for me to do a degree, then almost to complete another degree, and to make a little revolution, because I do have Uranus in the 10th in the sign of higher studies, which is Sagittarius, with a ruler in Capricorn. So that was time for me to actually go up the rank in praxis, okay, climb the mountain. Now is different for looking from outside of the structure and learning about all these things and the diversity of religions, the diversity of how they found the founding of politics. It really changes your perspective on things, I have to say. But it's also very interesting. Okay, it's also very interesting, and you clearly see that even when you, let's say, expose information, okay, or like news, then it's within what your founders can allow. So we need diverse fundings, and you really need to get to know these things applied. For 12th house, it's also my Pluto square. Okay, so it's like, hey, it's time for you. Like you cannot get away with not knowing that now. And it's also when I'm exposed to this information in a way it's like, okay, just sit and watch this video. The information is almost like on silver plate handed to you because it's time for you to learn about this, to tend to that. And you will see that your higher studies and your travel experience also affected by this. Okay, Aquarius also rules astrology, and I'm understanding of my travel experiences according to astrology now. Okay, where, for example, in the past, where I was like, oh, let's travel just not to do with something with real estate, or for where we live, just to enjoy the traveling. It was one of the most difficult travels that I had in my life. Once when we did that, I still remember this. It was not a bad experience, but when from within it was horrid, but outside it was of course I don't regret this one. Not only I don't regret, many years I believe that it's okay if I die, because I've seen so much of the world, and I'm so privileged to have seen so much of the world. So there's also those things. Saturn also rules like anxiety and stuff. Or kind of like depressive mode that blocks your joy of the experience, but you would need to process it, and then you can access the good of your experience. Yes, so the transits that you're undergoing are going to affect transits to your ninth house ruler, very likely either higher studies or being interested in philosophy and religion and international travels. 12th house might be almost fated for you to travel. Given Saturn went to my 12th house, it was fated for me to go on a plane. There was no way around doing that, which was the very difficult circumstances as well, but still privileged, still lucky in the place where I was. Okay, so I had the conjoining of difficult experiences, but great wealth is Pluto. It's great wealth within those experiences. Also be magnet for information, be magnet for what's next, what's the next step. And this is also important to remember. It was still difficult. And I'm still not, very grateful that I learned the things I learned. So those are the things. And then there is the moon, because moon is traveling very quickly. But let's say you're in a lunar year like I am today, this year, then you're also quite likely to travel. It's also quite, because moon is fast moving, so its symbolism is of traveling, and that depends where your moon is. Um, and is it higher studies? I don't know. I think traveling and movement, yes. It can be studies from the sense of lunar related studies. So you need to see where the moon is for you and what planet is ruling that place, that lunar place. Those will comprise kind of like your lunar year, also to do with birthing, fertility, upbringing, all the food stuff and so on. So I hope this assists you. I think that for some of you it might be validating, and the experiences that you've had with maybe even the best of your travels. So looking at your natal chart, knowing what to expect, and then knowing how to make the best of it is still vital, even when you do astrocartography. It's like all the external things, but there's also the internal, and you still experience it even when you relocate. So yes, that is something to say. And also for higher learning experience, then that can shape your higher learning experience quite some. So when you know that you activate the ninth, and you know what are you activating, what needs remediation, but you also know what potential for wealth you have and how you go about that wealth. Okay, if I go back to my chart, so Pluto in the ninth house, I understand that to get to the wealth, I do need to tend to the taboo place. The kind of like, even for the best of experience, again, that curious child that everybody goes on Efteling, we go here, we go there. This child's kind of like obsessed with like, oh, let's put paper. I have literally Mercury opposing Pluto in my natal chart. Let's put paper in the mouth of the garbage can and hear it speak Dutch again. Okay, so that is for how it is triggered. Let's say I had Venus, so probably to look at gardens and to travel in gardens, or to look at certain museums, and so on. So that can be another thing that can trigger this thing. So I have Mercury. Okay, I have Mercury in second house, but the ruler is Mars, and so enjoying different languages. So you travel where there are a lot of languages, and then you learn something in every language, and how different people think in every language, which was also my first degree. I was very curious about the mistakes that people make when they go between languages. And in general, I love to do mistakes of languages. It was the best, most interesting for me, and lexical studies, most interesting for me. And so this is another way in which you can kind of trigger where the wealth comes from, where the richness of experience comes from. And I also want you to know, let's say you like me, you have both malefics in the ninth house, and like, oh, am I not going to enjoy my traveling? Am I not going to enjoy my higher studies? Well, it's very likely, if they have Saturn, that your higher studies are going to coincide with certain Saturn transits. It doesn't have to be Saturn return, but definitely certain Saturn transits, and it's going to require a certain level of dedication, which is natural for this experience, but also when you travel. And so what you want to do is to turn to the other significations of Saturn. Okay? For example, for me, I had a good friend that was studying at first physics, but later geography, and what he did was something to do with forestry. So learning about how to build a forest and how to maintain a forest, and also desertification process, which is basically how to build up forests. So that is, I have Jupiter, which is trees, in Saturn sign, which is agriculture. And so looking at it from a bigger point of view, I had it from a friend. So even Saturn, okay, it is agriculture, is one signification. Maybe you can connect with nature if university, I loved to look at the trees. This is where my obsession with looking at trees really took place. I really like to look at the trees and lungs as the trees, and just kind of painting that. Um, so, and Jupiter is the planet of higher studies. Okay, it's the planet of philosophy, and it's also the planet of trees. I think most of our wisdom we got from trees, from imitating trees, sitting next to trees, painting trees, moving like the trees, and then like the animals and so on. But many wisdoms we got from the tree. And so, let's say it's Mars. So Mars is asking for a certain activity. Okay, so yes, you can tend to, there's the risk of injury, but also conflict. But it's also a game, and it's also being athletic. So for example, if you go abroad, you want to make sure you have space to do something athletic. You will also want to do this, very likely. Or if you're in academia, okay, so make sure you are going, whether it's to the gym, or I literally picked my institution according to the free membership to the gym, to the swimming pool, but later the cheaper gym. So I spent significant amount of time there. Mars in the ninth house, okay, just working out. It's very literal. And so those things can be a source of joy for you. You think it's going to be limiting, it's going to be conflictual. No, it can also be athletic, and it can also be the joy of nature, or looking at, you know, trees, or studying them from a certain perspective. Yeah, even if I think right now, one of the sites that I'm looking at, there's this website, it's called Useful Charts, not astrological charts, but it actually is about trees of genealogies of wealth families across history. And that is like very Saturn, Pluto, ninth house for me. And even in linguistics, the department, it liked Chomsky. So they worshipped Chomsky. I don't know why. They didn't teach us about his philosophy, which was strange. Okay, but what they did is mainly you draw trees, because that's what he did. The universal grammar, you draw trees. And then very briefly we tended to the fact that this may be true, but maybe not true, the universal grammar hypothesis. But this was, I spent the entire degree around trees, but they're linguistic trees. Okay, it's so freaking literal. So, yeah, just think about it. It's just so freaking literal. So, know that those significations, they stay with you. So you want to see how you can tweak around those in a way that is good for you, and learn about the signification of each planet. And this is kind of like your compass, because wherever you go, there's the natal chart, and then there's the layers that overlay this. So you will know to identify your experiences according to those overlaying. And then there is the place where you at, the chart of the country where you stay, kind of like the parents and the lines, and the timing, the transit of when you travel. Okay, let's say when I was traveling, when Saturn was squaring Uranus, that was a big signification of how I traveled. Big Uranus significations, a lot of chaotic energy around things, the way I got to know this part, that part, and then to comprise everything. And the rebellion towards Saturn, okay, that understanding if I do what the elders told me, I would get to the same place they are, which is not enough, which I would not survive in this way. So it required different things. Okay, that was, if I, as astrologer, I knew this paints the experience very well. Whereas if you don't know astrology, you're like, hey, I was supposed to have, let's say, I don't know, I took vacation. I was supposed to have nice time here. All these crazy things happen. Whenever I want something to go, by the book, something gets in the way. Or whenever I want to flow with that thing that gets in the way, suddenly something is like, no, but you're supposed to go by the book. And it's very crisis point. Okay, look at the transits. Look also at the transit. Your natal chart could be very cute. Look at the transit. What you're going through right now. There's so many things that color this experience, and that I hope can give you hope and validation. You're supposed to understand that it's not because you don't know how to plan a trip right, or because I don't know, everybody's enjoying and you're like dealing with an existential crisis. Where it's supposed to be vacation or supposed to be like a degree, I don't know, grass degree, where whatever they call it. So I was known for that. Not that I did it on purpose. I was like, hey, I'm excited about filmmaking, and then we went to the hardest filmmaking department in the country, pretty much. And I didn't know this. Then I was like, oh, let's do, I don't know, this and that, and apparently I took the two hardest things you can take for social sciences, and I was like, I didn't know that. I just do my job. Then I had a friend from biomedical engineering, and I was like, I could never do that. Nobody could ever do that. So imagine traveling, and like that's okay, and that is why when you know that, hey, you can expect this. I don't want you to be afraid of challenge, because when you see that in those places the challenge exists, you also see that in those places you would want to deal with those challenges. It's also true for transits. The challenge, it arrives with the desire to tackle it. You always, for hard aspects, you attract and you like magnet also the easy aspects to you. Whether it's by people, by synastries, by things that are a mixture of the easy and the difficult aspect, and you attract basically, you draw in, just by the merit of the transits, you draw in the information that you need to be at the phase that you are. So this is something that the more you pay attention to, the more you can strengthen. It doesn't mean all your problems are solved, but it does mean that I don't want you to be scared away from when you have hard planets. I think I will never enjoy my higher studies, or I would never study something, I don't know, that requires more dedication, or I would never enjoy traveling, or no point to waste all this money and so on. Then this is where it's like, or when alternatively you look for a savior, especially if you have Neptune in the ninth. Okay, looking for a savior. I will go to astrocartography, and then they will solve all of my problems. Oh yes, where is my Venus line? And then you discover that Venus is your benefic out of sect, and is bombarded with hard aspects to other planets. Okay, so there's your Venus line. But it's like, oh, why is this happening to me? There's all these power relations. Like, do you have a Venus hard aspect to Pluto in your natal chart? That might be the case. So you're both not looking for a savior in this kind of like in this praxis, but you also don't want to be too frightened of like what it entails. I guess there are always like these extreme cases with like, oh yeah, it's better for you to travel around the neighborhood, or better for you not to go to university or something like that. But first of all, we all have life philosophies, so you'll run into it there. And when it's time for you, like when it's perfected for you, the significations, then it's building up, take off. And that is, I guess, a realistic, hopeful video about it. So tell me, what is in your ninth house? If you know your birth time, you need your birth time for this. What planets are there, and what sign? So if you know the rulership, so the ruler of the sign. If not, I can tell you in the comments. And you can tell me of experience, or you can record a video in your own channel, okay? Express yourself for experiences that you've had in higher studies or in traveling or with your worldview, if you're willing to share. And that can be a source of knowledge for us all. So, and have an easy moon in Scorpio.